All right, so this is the moves and all about reform movements. So the expansionist movement in the 1820s started looking at Mexico because Mexico had become independent from Spain, and America saw this as a land for new opportunity. So the expansionist movement in the 1820s started looking at Mexico because they became independent from Spain, and Americans saw this as an opportunity. The expansionist movement started using the term known as manifest destiny. And manifest destiny is actually the belief that God wanted the United States to own all of North America. Yes, that's right. They believed God wanted the United States to own all of North America. And if you want to know more about manifest destiny, go! Now, many attributed all the bad stuff in the United States to alcohol. So temperance meant drinking in moderation. And the temperance movement won some success in the 1850s when they get some of the laws changed in the states about alcohol. So the temperance movement had some success in the 1850s when they get alcohol laws passed in some states. If you want to know more about the temperance movement, there you go. All right, so abolition. Abolition, with the growth of slavery, the cotton industry grew. And so did opposition to slavery in the abolition movement. Abolition is the opposition to slavery, and we will talk a lot more about that. I just wanted to touch on it here later. So there's the abolitionist movement. Another movement of the early 1800s, in the education reform movement. In the early 1800s, reformers began pushing for public school systems funded by taxes. That's why you're here. And it started with the Horace Mann in Massachusetts in 1837. So the education reform movement to have public schools funded by taxes started in 1837 with the Horace Mann in Massachusetts. And if you want to read more about the Horace Mann, there you go. Now on to the women's movement. Now, in the early 1800s, women began to change the role that they had in society by being involved with religious and abolitionist movements. So in the early 1800s, women began to change the role they had in society by being involved in religious and abolitionist movements. In 1848, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and others organized the Seneca Falls Convention for Women. So in 1848, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and others organized the Seneca Falls Conference. If you want to know more about Elizabeth Cady Stanton, there you go. And there you go again. Now, at Seneca Falls, they adopt a Declaration of Sentiments on Women's Rights. But really, this brings about no changes because it had no power of law. So they adopt the Declaration of Sentiments on Women's Rights, but really it brought about no changes because it did not have the power of law. Stanton continued to fight for improvements, though, and she gained some improvements in property rights in New York. If you want to read about the Seneca Falls Conference, there you go. The Declaration of Sentiments, and on to the Jackson. This is the age of Jackson. Now, Andrew Jackson got beat up in the election of 1824 by a man named John Quincy Adams. Yes, he is related to John Adams. This was his son. And he then becomes a symbol of democracy by projecting himself as the down-to-earth common man. So Jackson gets beat in the election of 24, but then he becomes the down-to-earth common man. And in many ways he was. He's really the first president who was not an aristocrat. Jackson wins the election of 1828 because he portrayed himself that way. And if you want to know more about Andrew Jackson, there you go. And here's some more. Now, Jackson promised to return to strong state governments and a weak federal government. He also promised he would not interfere in slavery. So Jackson promised to return to strong state governments and a weak federal government. And he promised he wouldn't get involved in slavery. Jackson also pushed to change new party structure. He organized state and local branches. He had tight party discipline, and he rewarded loyalists to him with government jobs. So he had the spoils system.